In today's presentation, we will be going over Florida's Big Four natural disasters and how they affect us all. The first natural disaster we'll be covering is the problems with flooding. How will a warming Earth contribute to coastal flooding? How has man-made decisions affected our susceptibility to flooding? And what happens with flooding in case of a natural disaster, such as a hurricane? In this slide, we see the difference between Greenland's ice sheet from 1979 to 2007. According to Stefan Ronstori of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, global warming will contribute to coastal flooding in the form of seawater, not precipitation. The ice sheet in Greenland, if melted, has the potential to raise the world's sea level by 7 meters alone. Furthermore, warm water naturally expands in volume compared to cooler water. As the cycle of global warming continues, the caps will melt and enter the ocean. Once melted, they will further increase in volume as they are incorporated into these warmer temperatures. In this slide, we will look at the man-made influences that cause flooding. The first is the development of infrastructure in flood-prone areas. Man-made construction in flood-prone areas has led to an increase in susceptibility to flooding because the natural resiliency of these ecosystems has become compromised. Think about it. With a city covered in solid surfaces like pavement and concrete, where is the water supposed to go? When these areas experience large amounts of water, it will unnaturally accumulate in low-lying areas. And even with the use of drainage systems, in these alarm storm surge situations, there is simply nowhere for the water to go. The next thing we look at is bad farming practices. Now, some farmers have caused soil and water to flush into rivers by leaving fields bare and compacting land with cattle and heavy machinery. Even choosing the wrong direction to plow can cause floods. The third thing we'll look at is deforestation. The effects of deforestation in a region without the ecological service of trees and plants leads to an increased risk of flooding and erosion whenever it rains and storms. Without these natural roots and grasses to soak up this soil, it simply washes over and goes to the low-lying areas. As all of us live in Florida, we are very familiar with what happens in the case of a natural disaster such as a hurricane. As you can see in this photograph of Hurricane Michael, the non-porous urban environment of the city has only exacerbated the floodwater situation, leaving rivers and water flowing through the city streets. Without the abundance of soil to act as a sponge, this is always bound to happen in these city environments. In the next section, we'll be looking at the problems with hurricanes. Hurricanes destroy anything in its path. This can lead to an incredible amount of property damage, requiring humans to rebuild homes and businesses. This also leads to a sea level rise. This sea level rise makes more waves come ashore, which causes massive flooding. This leads to potentially catastrophic environmental loss and pollution in the waterways. Furthermore, with these rising sea levels, this only serves to magnify the storm surge from these hurricanes, causing even more damage. It is important to note that hurricanes can really only form over warm ocean, with water 80 degrees or warmer. When that happens, it can start to form clouds, which rise with the heated air around it. These clouds lead to rain clouds and water vapor. This further fuels hurricanes and makes them stronger. What if I were to tell you that there might be a way to stop hurricanes from hitting landfall? Crazy, right? Well, with $280 billion in property damage, scientists have been doing quite a bit of research on hurricanes. So far, the general theory is that they might be able to use air bubbles to cool off the ocean and try to stop these hurricanes from even forming. Crazy, right? The third natural disaster we will be covering is the tornado. The word tornado derives from the Spanish words tornar, which means to turn, and tronada, which means thunderstorm. People can recognize these tornadoes by their funnel shape, which consists of violent rotating winds. Tornadoes are vertical funnels of rapidly spinning air, which have been known to turn up to 250 miles per hour, clear a pathway a mile wide and up to 50 miles long. The most condensed region in the United States for these tornadoes occurs in Tornado Valley. This is a region that includes the area of eastern South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, northern Texas, and eastern Colorado. It is important to note that the most violent tornadoes come from storms called supercells. These are incredibly large thunderstorms that have winds that are already in rotation. About 1 in 1,000 storms will become a supercell, but only 1 in 6 of these will actually spawn off tornadoes. It's important to note also that May generally has the more tornadoes than any other month, but April's twisters are usually more violent. Tornadoes actually form when the warm, humid air combines with cold, dry air. The denser cold air is pushed over the warm air. The warm air then rises through the cooler air, causing an updraft. With this updraft, water droplets from the moist air form a funnel cloud. The funnel cloud continues to grow, and eventually it will descend from the cloud, touching the ground and becoming a tornado. This photo helps to identify some of the characteristics of a tornado. Once a tornado hits the ground, it may live for as little as a few seconds or as long as 3 hours. The average twister is about 660 feet wide and moves around 30 miles an hour. Most don't travel more than 6 miles though before dying out. In this slide, we look at man-made impact on potential tornado causes. And to be honest, there isn't a 100% answer on whether we influence tornadoes or not. Scientists generally agree that climate change will increase the likelihood of extreme weather events, but the jury is still out on how tornadoes will fare in a warming world. According to Grady Dixon, an associate professor at geosciences at Mississippi State University, the most common finding is that warming environments leads to more storms and more intense storms, but the intensity doesn't necessarily. In this last section of the presentation, we'll discover the problems with wildfires. Wildfires can be caused by many different things, spreading rapidly without warning. It's important to note that weather plays a significant role when studying the conditions related to wildfires. Also, how can we suppress wildfires, or better yet, prevent them from happening altogether? In this next slide, you can see some of the natural causes and the man-made causes that are creating these wildfires. It is important to note that ground fires, underground fires, burn slowly for days to months at a time. Surface fires feed off low-lying vegetation. They spread at a slow rate, but they can accelerate due to the slope and wind speed of the conditions they are in. The last one is the canopy fire, which is This chart illustrates the wildfires that have occurred from 1994 to 2013 in the United States. As you can see in this chart, the Northwest and the Southeast are two of the largest locations for wildfires. Much of this is caused by a dry climate with warm areas. It is important to note that since 1994, the southeastern region of Florida has had the most wildfires in the United States. In this last slide, we go over some of the prevention and suppression methods that we do use in the United States. Federal prevention campaigns have been enacted since the 1940s. This includes planned burns and updated building codes, which greatly reduce the risk of our environment and fires. As far as suppression, by detecting and implementing correct measures like fire breaks, which is water being dropped from helicopters, this gives first responders a higher chance of stopping a fire before it goes out of control. Although these measures are in place, Thank you all for listening to our presentation today on Florida's Big Four natural disasters. Hopefully you could take away from this some knowledge about how you may be able to help impact these natural disasters in a positive and preventative way. Have a great day.